Yo, how's everyone doing? This is True Crypto 28, Mr. Anderson from Twitter. Just wanted to give you a quick market update. We did get the quarterly and the monthly close. I won't spend too much time on that, but I'll get into it a little bit, talk about a little bit of the local price action, and I can go a little bit further, hopefully in the next coming days as well. I know a lot of you guys are in quarantine, so that's to be pretty rough. I know there's a lot of places that are worse off than others, so certainly we feel for everyone that's doing it. Let's just kind of jump in a little bit, see what we can come up with. We'll keep this one short and quick. If you can do me a favor, hit the like button. It definitely helps. So I would appreciate that. Subscribe if you haven't already. And let's just jump on in. Here we go. All right, so obviously we dumped out, had the major dump out. And what's come of this is just a really complicated structure. I mean, there's just no other way to look at it. This is absolutely complicated. Let's look at why. I mean, first and foremost, we had a situation to where, yes, complete carnage, a little bit of a mini bounce, a little bit of a pullback here. And what this ended up showing us here is we had this low time frame Wyckoff. If you don't know Wyckoff, you don't need to know it. Don't worry about it right now. It's not that important. But we basically have this situation here where you end up on a low time frame. This was a quick version of it, right? You basically showed that you had this point where it tried to hold, right? You see this right here on my screen? Let me just make it a little clearer for you. Right there, we tried to hold that, didn't happen. So then you dump out and you create this creek, or what's called like a river of supply, and you basically hit that supply, you fall out. Hit the supply, fall out. Third time, nope. Fourth time, nope. Fifth time, good effort. Sorry, it ain't gonna work. But then you find that yourself putting a little bit of lower low. You make a lower low on the 4 hour on close, but basically avoiding the wick situation. So a little bit of a higher low from that standpoint. Come back in again, fight the good fight, and then finally jump the creek, come back, test that area. Basically what that's telling you is you got past this supply, which is very important. And then it's become very interesting since then, right? Because keep in mind, this is a very low time frame type of pattern. A lot of times this can end up being a much bigger pattern, which we'll talk about. So we might find out that this is just a much bigger either Wyckoff, or it's going to fail completely, go to a lower low. A lot can happen. But in the meantime, it's intriguing. And one of the reasons why it's intriguing is this. You've jumped up into this area and you have showed one time, really 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different hard tests of this area that have held. So, I want to give it the respect. Now, look, the pressure's down, right? There's downward pressure because we are in a mega downtrend, period. But the low time frames have done pretty well. You might ask, well, what do you mean by that? Well, let me just a very brief explanation of this, right? So usually when you're in a mega downtrend or just a downtrend in general, when you get these pressure situations and momentum, where momentum certainly got exhausted, you can see what happened up here, right? Whew, big dump, right? Same thing here, dump. Over here, same type of situation. This was just one getting exhausted. This was our previous area where we went completely bare right there. But the idea is that since that time, you could see what happened when you get exhausted. Just mega sell-offs. Well, you find out more at the time of a pullback, right? And basically, thus far, it has been very resistant to those pullbacks. We've seen that occur. And it's not only on the 4 hour, we can go up to the 12 hour as well and see the same thing. Now, does that mean it's going to hold? No, absolutely not. Doesn't mean that at all. But you ended up getting a bear crossed 12 hour like that. Now, it's threatening doing it again, right? And this is where the pressure would be, right? We could look at the 4 hour again and see same situation here that, all right, you're entering into what could be a heavy pressure zone. So the idea is bulls would certainly want to hold this area, which I'll explain why in a minute. But the idea is that so far it's done okay. It's done okay. There's a lot of risk, but this previous area of supply has absolutely been support, and it's done well. Now, when you look at something like this Wyckoff, you're wondering, like, well, what is that? It's just basically a formation showing supply and demand. We've had many of them before. This is another famous one, ultimately, which is the scenario here, where you basically found yourself coming off the 14,000 level. You had the fake out on the mega short covering rally, fall into the area. You create that river supply where it fails, but you hold on pretty well again on that pullback, fail again, couldn't get there, jump the creek, back up against the creek. This is considered the creek. Now keep in mind there's a lower creek, by the way, but we won't get into that right now. But you have the upper creek, lower creek. Either way, the whole thing's technically your supply. But the fact that it bounced off the creek like that, you got a beautiful run up to 10,500, as we know. I mean, that was a fabulous run. And then look, the world fell apart. So I mean, it is what it is. But it was a very interesting phenomenon that was going on. Things were actually looking pretty well. And then it was at this point, I won't review that. We've done this on video, but in Discord, this was the actual point where we said, hey, this could bounce. This was actually on a 12-hour. Let's see. Just so that looks a little cleaner as to why. I think it was a 12-hour. Yeah, it was something like that. To where we said, hey, this was our... No, it was on a daily. I apologize. Yep, there it is. So we said, hey, this could be our bounce level. It was that day that we said it. It began to bounce. It was a two-way play. The play was, look, this thing has to bounce and go. If we lose it, we're short, and our bias is short. That was the play, and absolutely that's how it played out. It played out perfectly. Short bias from that point on, which obviously ended up going remarkably well, obviously because of the virus, but it is what it is. You'll take it. And the scenario is where we're at. But the point I was making, though, is that you had this situation to where we then came back and we were dumping back towards this creek, which was a support. And it really tried for a good 3 days. We even mentioned it like, hey, look, this thing's actually trying. I'll give it a chance if we could clear this level. I want it to clear this level right here. I'm not going to mark too many things off because I want to make this as quick as possible because my wife's going to divorce me. 81.91, so I wanted to close above 81.91, and I was going to be pretty bullish if that were to occur. But it didn't happen. We lost this area. We put out a tweet. We said it on Discord. Don't lose this area, right? You lose this area, you got problems. Guess what? We lost that area, the mega dump, right? That's basically what it was. The lower creek gave nothing. It just dumped on through. It was a hell of a situation. Now, another great example is our bottom, right, in 2018-19, right here. This is absolutely another Wyckoff situation. Again, don't think you need to know Wyckoff because the reality is Wyckoff's pretty damn confusing. Distributions, accumulations, they look very similar until you get to the final phase, and I'll explain a little bit of that here. But I do want to mark this off really quickly. First, I want to show you that I'm not full of shit, right? We came here. This was an area where we tried to bounce, right? That's how you usually identify it. Didn't happen. Dumped on through, resisted, dumped again, came back, nope, too much supply, didn't even get close that time. One more try, there she goes, can't get it. It doesn't have to be on a daily. We could look at something like a 4-hour. Might give us a cleaner look here, etc., etc. And I would lower this on the 4-hour like this. Okay. Either way, I'm not trying to perfect it right now today. Let's actually bring it back up. Let's give it a big old area. But the idea is, here you go, there you go. And what do? Jump the creek. So I'll tell you what, man, a lot of people, they always thought we had to retest this, right? Usually you dump the creek and come back at some point and get a back up to that creek and go, which I showed you before. It didn't happen. Now, it's not the reason why we came back down, so don't worry about anything like that. But the whole point is these are interesting levels because these are rivers of supply, and this was a big one, right? So this one lasted a few months, which in crypto is like a couple years. You were talking about something that began in late November, and finally, April 2nd, boom, is when she jumped it. So you had several months of action there. Whereas the most recent one, we didn't have anything like that, right? We had some time, of course, right? So you're in a situation where you say, well, let's not say it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. It was, what, 8 days, right? So 8 days is something, but it's not a whole lot. But it is trying to put that fight in. Now, here's the interesting thing. Where do we dump down to? What's this? Aha! The previous creek, right? It's not a coincidence. That is a very interesting area that we held, and let me tell you, don't lose it, right? Don't lose that area. But anyway, we'll get to that in a minute. That's something that's very intriguing. Popped above, we're holding it. We've talked about that already. All I did here is wick to wick. I'm drawing a little bit of an area here. This one I went close to close. Sometimes I'll do that. I'll mix it up. I'll do wick to wick on one side, close to close on the other. It doesn't really matter. You can do it the opposite like that if you wanted to. It's not going to make a major difference in how this thing looks. Either way, you can see you're getting some sort of symmetrical pattern. We're right in the middle of it, which just makes it even more difficult. But basically, you could see we're stuck between a lot of different areas. Now, the interesting thing, let's talk about a bull scenario. If you make it out of here, okay, we've spoke about this a couple weeks ago where I said, hey, you know what, I could definitely see this coming into this area of the 200s here on the 4-hour. That was a little bit higher at the time, but we knew that it was dropping and we drew it that way. But regardless, it's come down now. So if it was going to make a run, it's more obtainable. But what else is now obtainable? The previous area here, and I'm going to give you some this would be my lower creek, and this would be my upper creek, right? Right there. So we could see that this red area, it's no coincidence that we're stuck here. We're trying to enter into that previous, what? Supply. And it's a hell of a supply. If you can get past this barrier, it will open the door. And I'll tell you, I don't have a strong read on this thing, guys. I'm not trying to tell you I know. In these situations, I'm not going to be that guy. You know, you could flip a coin. If I say, yeah, it's going to be bullish. If I end up being right, you say, hey, he's Nostradamus. The reality is that's not trading, right? I want to be able to trade both scenarios. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I would feel pretty good that if you got past this area here, you start closing some candles up there, right? So our highest H4 close is right there. Let's say if we get one above that, I'll feel pretty damn confident actually. You know, I'd like to see H12 or daily, but I feel pretty confident that, hey, we're going to at least test the top side of that previous creek. Now, Bitcoin has some things where it does some remarkable things. Sometimes it runs through it, but we'd have to bring in some other time frames and look at what's going on. I don't want to go too far with that. This looks pretty serious, obviously. That's legit for resistance. This is obviously very legit for resistance now, or at least it would be in equities, but you're in a situation to where you're stuck between these zones. We're resisting at a clear resistance, right? We're supporting at a recent support, but an interesting support, and we stopped at a very strong support. So this guy's here. Now, that's the upside. Pretty simple. Get yourself out of here. Come up and play in this area. Maybe live up here a little bit and see what happens and see if you can make this a new support. However, the downside is pretty simple as well, but it does get a little complicated. Well, first of all, I don't want to lose this area, right? So I have my horizontal that I want to certainly pay attention to. I don't want to lose that. If that's my H4, nope, I'm not going to use that. I will use those in a minute. When I look at something else, let me use this here. So if that's my lowest H4 close, let's hold on to that if we can. We have a little bit of a gap. If you're wondering how I drew this, I'm looking at a daily, right? So if you see this box, basically that's my little gap here on the daily. If I moved it, I apologize. This was the daily closing high. Oh, you know what? I changed this around. I apologize. So that was my daily closing high. Rather, this actually look like this. And my daily closing low. That's actually how I prefer it to look. So really, that red line was actually in the perfect spot. That's exactly where I wanted it. Okay. Like that is how it should look. Much better now. In same scenario, though, you could see like, okay, it's been holding, it's been holding. Now, you're seeing a little bit of upslope. Good. We'll see what happens. Sometimes you get a nested, right, where you come down. You see 2 tries and then it goes again. We'll see what happens with that. But the idea is the key area is when it's finally going to break, right? So when we break this range, and why do I say that matters? I know I'm jumping around. I'm trying to give you a lot of information in a little time, so hopefully I'm not driving you crazy. But look at this candle. See this massive candle right here, right? This huge indecision candle. We're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 candles in. And what that represents, so now that's 2 weeks of data essentially, right? So you got 2 weeks of data, and anytime you see that, just like some basic candle math, just think of it this way. Here you go. Where was the open of our candle? Right about here. It's a little bit green at the moment, not very green, but a little green. The candle looks like this. Now you got a 13-day indecision candle. That's what this thing looks like, right? Now, can I make a determination off of that? Of course not. I have no idea what that thing's going to do. I have no idea. So from that perspective, but that's what we're looking at. But it is building up that momentum so that when it's ready, it's going to have the ability to give that push, right? You get that squeeze, you get that push, and that's where we're at. Now, the downside of this is you break to the downside, and you do have this big support down here, but it gets a little dicey. It gets a little bit scary, right? I could make an argument if I wanted to and say, all right, well, perhaps I could have some topside support here on a daily scale. Once I had this fight, I was losing the fight. I lost the fight, came back, resisted, finally got over, and that's what helped me to really break on through. So you're going to hope if you're wanting to be bullish, you're going to want to see something like that hold on a daily close, and you want it to bounce again, right? So you would like it to maybe get caught in this area, bounce around if you can, and see what comes of it. But in all likelihood, you probably lose that area, something like this. If you're fortunate, you get a retest of the area, right, like this, and put yourself into a position to be able to short that. Or this guy comes back and does the same exact thing. He comes up, and you can short that area as well. Now you see this as SFP or else, a swing failure pattern or else. What does that mean? Basically, if I lose this level, I'm okay with losing it, but let's say I'm wherever we are tomorrow, the next day, a few days down, we end up popping ourselves a candle. Just imagine this candle's red, and it breaks this level and this level intraday. You want it to close back above the low of this particular candle right there. I don't want to mark off too many, but that's right around that 56.84 level. So you can count it as the possibility of a swing failure and maybe build something off that again. And then, of course, with this squeeze that we're seeing, obviously you'd rather it be inside of this area as well. But we'll see what comes of that. But if not, you have a lot of area to play with, right? So by all means, any type of drop into this area, I'm going to be looking for shorts, right? And if you guys have your strategy, so be it. But I'm going to look personally to short exhaustion on different time frames. But I'll be looking for short entries. And then, of course, look, I might be surprised. We just mentioned the fact that shorts have been doing, the exhaustion has been holding up pretty well. I mean, there's moves in here. They were all successful trades, right? Everything I showed you earlier in terms, what am I talking about? I'm talking about this again. These are successful trades for sure. But they held up well, right? You could see that they held up well. There was a decent grind there. So I'll be on the lookout for that as well, which could be a sign of strength. But what this can turn out to be, if I clear this for a second, is you could end up with this massive, not massive, or a bigger structure, right? To where we might say, like, all right, look, we lost this area. If that happens, if we see the downside and it holds to the low side, or maybe we make a little bit of a lower low, whatever it is, you can create a situation to where you say, wait a second, this could be our river of supply. This could be our potential creek, right? To where now we build out longer, right? And I don't have to show you this because I don't want to blotch the screen, but it's basically from here to there, guys. And we basically say, you know what? Let me just erase everything so that I can show you. Let's get rid of all this now. I showed you enough on that. And we would say something like, hey, this would be our river of supply, right? Which would make sense because it basically bodes with all this anyway. So, I mean, it makes perfect sense if that were the case. And we could be building on something bigger that's in between. We already talked about the lower level, right, from back here, the top side. So let's just imagine, I'm not going to draw this perfectly to scale here, but we know this was somewhere in this 4,000 range, right? Let's just say like that, just for the sake of being quick. And we're building something in between. So you might see this guy bounce around, if that were the case. I'm not going to find the right tool, but bounce around in here, come back again, make another test. Then ultimately, at some point down the road, make that run, leap. At that point, I would like to get a backup to the creek if that's the case. And then obviously you have yourself maybe a pretty epic long in that situation. But it's a lot of steps ahead. We'll talk about all that beforehand. But that's how you can kind of envision bigger patterns, right? But in the meantime, I'm not going to be thinking too much about that. I'm going to be thinking that if we lose this area that I mentioned, this triangle, I'm thinking about looking for shorts. And if I get caught on a couple of them, so be it. Certainly, I'm going to have a directional bias that's to the downside. I'm going to want the majority of my trades to be that way. I'm going to let this thing play out a little bit, though. It's right in the middle of a range that, it's in the middle of a range within a range. It's not exactly the ideal spot for me. I might take some low time frame trades. I mean, you see something like this occur, and sometimes this is interesting. The problem is it's so early in the candle, right? So this 4-hour candle just opened. If this was a candle that was just closing, this is a trade I would take. I wouldn't mind doing this at all. A little bit of a local low. Basically didn't hold up at the most ideal spot here. It was a decent spot, but you see that a lot. Good for a trade. But that's that. That's ultimately what we're looking at with the local price action. Now, if we look at something on a bigger scale like the daily, that's interesting as well, without getting too far into things like the Wyckoffs and the setup and the price action, I will bring in moving averages just to kind of get a picture. Now, look, the moving averages, they're in a position where they've needed to catch up. The only real thing I want to show you is really this blue, brighter blue right here. That's my 21 exponential moving average right there. This one is my 20 simple moving average. And what we see is it's hanging out. You're getting that traversion action, which is just a sign of ranging, right? Sometimes you're not going to get this action within the moving average. And the reason for that is you're range bound within that candle. So this is all like one candle. So you got to think of it as one candle, and intra candle you're breaking up and down, up and down. So that's one of the reasons why that's occurring. And it's not respecting the moving averages at the moment, but at some point it will, right? One thing you want to see is a little bit of confluence come into play. We've seen this here, but this was on a weekend where you say, all right, well, we lost that 20. Now it's a little bit scary. But the moving averages, they take time to catch up. So what I would like to see is for this guy to establish itself either over the 21 and make it clear that it wants to basically hold that level. How do you do that? Well, let's say it was a candle like this. Close above the high of the candle, something very simple. Okay, it's showing me that it not only made it above the 21, but that there's then buyers above that level, enough buyers to take it above the close of that candle. Pretty simple concept, right? Same down here, the 20 is down here. Well, I would like to lose it, right? But I don't just want to lose it. I would like to now close a candle below that level as well, because it shows me that, hey, not only did I lose my 20, but there's enough sellers that they want to see lower prices as well, because it always wants to go somewhere, right? So at the moment, the only place it wants to go is in this triangle. That's what's happening. So that's where we're at. So I'm watching that. I'm watching the 20 simple, the 21 exponential, and I'm not only looking for a close above or below one of them, but I want the next candle to then exceed that level as well. Okay. So that's another interesting element to where we're at. I'll touch base. I did mention that, I want to keep this very short if I can. I'm going to take off these moving averages. But really, I want it to make sense. Like, hey, I want you to be able to say, why is this happening? Like, what's going on with this weird range? In reality, it does make sense, and I'm going to kind of show you something to kind of give you an understanding. Let's look at just the bigger portions of what's happened. First thing I want to do is I want to show you everything. I'm going to put up the volume profile. If you guys aren't familiar with volume profile, essentially all is showing you exactly how much was traded at a certain level, right? And this red line is going to be what's called a point of control, right? So it's going to show you essentially how much was traded, what was traded the most at that level. So if we look at this level here, we say, all right, well, we leveled up to this 14,000. So if we're looking from 14,000 to the most recent range, right? Let's see where we're at here. Just want to show you. Where's my tool? I'm just going to mark off a few areas so that we understand. So that's going to be right about there. And then I want to show you another range, which is going to be from 3,000 from our bottom. Remember our bottom back then. And that's going to be essentially right about, let's see, there, like that. And then I want to go all the way to our 20,000 top. So I think most people would agree, right? We went top to bottom, bottom to top, top to bottom, right? So I'm just looking at what I would call the most relevant areas of this time. Nothing more. Okay, there we go. And we see this red line again. If you see the areas I'm lined, it's always going to be that red line. And now I'm just going to get rid of the VP, the volume profile, because it can get ugly. Now why? Why am I showing you this? Look what's going on here. We fought for this exact area. Right? You saw me use the tool, right? The exact area is the area we're fighting for. That's that creek that we talked about. Lost it. Okay, where do we stop? Down here. All right, very interesting. You stopped and you bounced. Okay, where do we bounce to? This one. So we have three key ranges going from 20,000. Because if you go before that, you're just looking at something down low. Everything before the 20,000 most things were down at the 2,000, 1,000, which if you lose this, that's when it's scary. So you don't want to get involved in that. But the whole point is, if you look at it from this concept, you understand that, look, this all makes a lot of sense, right? We stopped out here. It's everything we went over earlier. These are the points of control, depending on where you're looking at the chart. So the battle's happening right here. Now, why can't it go back up and test this area? It absolutely can. The markets love, you guys know how markets like to chop. They chop on all time frames, and we're in the midst of a big move. So don't think for a second you can't retest this upper area here. The reason why you can is that if you end up, think of it like a seesaw, right? You basically you tend to overgo one side, and then if that happens, you tend to overdo it again to the other side. Even if this thing wants to kind of hang out here, it would still make sense to come up this level. Now, again, we obviously know we're here. If we reject from here, we're going to live in this area. We're going to find out how many people are willing to accumulate and what they're willing to pay heading into this halving. But this is just another visual to show you that I mapped it out. No cheating, right? No form fitting. These are the exact areas. And now when you come in and you look at these levels and you look back, you can say, oh wow, these are some of the most key levels you could ever imagine on this chart, which makes sense because that's where the most volume was traded. Right there on that 6,000, right? Right here where we stopped out and ran. Right here where we just recently bottomed. Right here at the 3,000 bottom again, etc., etc., etc. Right here at the point that we didn't want to lose. Right here at the point that we needed to gain during this creek, right? You gained the creek, you jumped the creek, you came back and tested it again. See ya. So it's very interesting stuff, and we have to keep an eye on it. Now I'll jump to the high time frame and I'll wrap this guy up. First I'll go to a 3-month. Actually, let me change my chart. I think I have this drawn somewhere. Yeah, this one will do. So if I bring up, first of all, this blue is a 21. I'll start with the 3-month as I mentioned I would. All right. Just to understand something, guys. On the 3-month, you don't have a lot of history. So first and foremost, you're not looking at a whole lot of data. Now, what I would say is that we always held the 8 for the most part, except for bear markets. So that's one scary thing. You see that deep dark dive right there. The deep dark dive right there, and then right now we've entered that situation again. So we could see bear market as we've seen in the past, right? You definitely want to reclaim this area and hold it on a 3-month close. That's actually the area I wanted to hold if I was going to be a little bit more bullish. Basically you see this level here. A lot of people were happy that, hey, we closed above this level. Now I'm going to show you some pivots real quick. It's going to get a little crazy on your eyes, so forgive me. But these are essentially pivots. The only one I want you to look at right now is the white one. And the white is going to be your pivot of your month, your quarterly closes and open, right? So this was yesterday's close right there. I'll zoom in. We did, in fact, hold that level. Good job. But I would have rather closed above this one, right? Because ultimately this was part of a downtrend anyway, where you closed above it, rejected here, went down, right? So this was a level I would prefer to hold. Not to mention the fact that I just showed you, right, where the 8 was. It lines up also with where that 8 was. If you could have closed up in that area, then you could paint more of a bullish scenario. Now, doesn't mean we can't go bullish. The 3 months pretty hard chart to just suddenly decide to trade on, right? It doesn't quite work that way, but ultimately you're in a situation where it isn't the prettiest. Is the tail nice? Yes. Is it a massive spinning spinning top doji? Yes. Is it an indecision candle? Yes. So you could certainly go both ways, but I don't love it. I don't hate it, but I don't love it. But all things considered, how far we went, not so bad. You do like the fact that the 21 held, right? So it did bounce off the 21. That is an absolute 21 rejection. That's a good sign because it's always held the 21. So we want to keep that in mind. That's the quarterly. Let me jump into the 1 month. The 1 month, however, did not hold that 21. Okay, there you go with the 21. You see what's happened in the past when we've lost that 21. Scary things. Usually make a run down to that 55. I'm not going to bring up the other chart, but we've done it before. Right here, this is good enough history. Same thing when we lost that 21. Deep dark bear market, not good, not good at all. Right? Does that mean we're going to have to live under there? No. You know what? There's an old professional trick, right, where you go under 1 month, next month you pop back up. You see that on Amazon a lot, where you get that accumulation right under, and perhaps that's what's happening, but I can't bet on that. I can't trade off that. What I can say is on a monthly basis, this looks terrible, right? I mean, there's no other way to look at it. Now, I will say this in hindsight. We talked about how bad the previous month looked. We did talk about it, and it did look like crap. I mean, this is obviously a terrible candle. But one thing here, especially for my guys, you guys know how I feel about this exactly right there. And looking at this, and I think what it comes down to is, sometimes you don't want to believe, because you guys know I had a bearish bias the whole way through this as well, but I certainly didn't think I was going down to $3,600, right? But when you see this, I mean, this was a terrible, terrible sign. This signature right here is an awful sign. Now, a lot of you guys don't know what that means. I don't have the time to explain it on this one, but this is simply RSI, and seeing this exact structure, this is the exact short that we look for. I mean, this is a short. Now, do I tell people short on a monthly basis? No, but it does fit into the profile of, hey, we were looking for shorts. Now, with this, what I'm looking for now on a monthly scale is just looking for the blue levels, right? So I'm looking for blue levels because those are going to be pivots as well. Well, we had one way down here. We had one in the past right there. You see that blue level right there. We had one right there. So it did hold when it came into this area, which basically lined up with your bottom before in 2018-19. And then, of course, during the jump off here when we ran up to 20,000. But ultimately, you did lose this one up here, which was important at that 7,400 level. And that's one right there as well. So from a monthly basis, look, you made a lower low. You took out a monthly. Yes, the wick is very nice, but I can't say that candle's bullish at all either. I just can't. Now, sometimes you see a candle, something like this, right, where you get bearish candle, bullish engulfing candle, and look how ugly this one is because the next candle was ugly too, right? So again, monthlies, it's just one of those time frames that it's very useful. It helps for intra-month. It helps to get some idea of where we're at. But I don't take trades off that, right? So I'm not looking at the monthly and saying, hey, this is my trade for the next 14 months. You know, I just can't do it that way. Or 3 to 8 months or anything along those lines. I can utilize it as part of an idea, maybe a strong part of the idea, maybe the strongest part of the idea. But ultimately, that's kind of the idea what I'm looking at. And then, of course, you lost at 21. But not only did you lose it, I mean, you really lost this thing. You did bounce off to 55. This thing needs a reclaim, right? You need April to reclaim this guy and just get it out of here. If I see... I don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, we expect volatility this month. But if I'm below this thing again, I'm going to get concerned. I'm going to feel like it's going to be several months. I know we got the halving, we got all those things, but the 21 months is not an area you want to live under. It's already dicey enough to where a lot of people want it to go to cash. Cash has obviously been king. Will that last? Who knows? I mean, the Fed just invented, $10 trillion basically, but still, for the most part, the dollar's been very strong. Which has made the bounce even more impressive by Bitcoin. But all in all, it's still correlated. If the S&P is going to hurt, it looks like Bitcoin's going to hurt. I'd love to see a decoupling, but we haven't seen anything like that just yet. I'm going to play my chart. So in review, I think you guys have an understanding of where I'm at. We're basically stuck between a couple ranges, right? Those ranges are key. I'm not going to get into the futures chart today. I'll probably do that tomorrow. Ultimately, it makes perfect sense to be in this battle right now. I'm going to go back to the lower time frame. Let me see what I can do here. Maybe I can cheat my way back to my cool looking view that I had for you guys. Boom, boom, boom. Look at that. All right. So, look, we're stuck in this range. You need to break out one way or the other. That's going to be key for the bigger moves. On the lower time frames, look, feel free to play your setups, etc. Personally, I hate to trade in the middle of these particular ranges like that. It's just not something I like to do. But there is room here, right? So this is a pretty big range. So I could see taking trades, as I mentioned. I did mention this area here. Like, look, unfortunately, if you're being aggressive, that was a trade, as I mentioned. You could see even during the stream it worked out. I wasn't paying that close attention while we were talking, but the idea is that would be a front run because you prefer to have a candle close in that particular situation. But it is what it is. Other than that, guys, I'm out for now. I appreciate you spending a little bit of time with me. I hope you guys are staying safe. Like I said, hit me up if you have some questions. I'll try to answer them in the next stream if I can. Everyone stay safe out there. I know it's a crazy time. Safer you can stay, the better. I mean, the thing is very serious. I know a lot of people are downplaying it. Really, it's not the thing to do. Don't downplay this thing. It is very serious. It's extremely contagious. It's a once-in-a-lifetime type of thing. And it's certainly once in our lifetime, right, to be on such a global scale. But definitely enjoy this community. Miss you guys. We'll talk to you soon. I'm out for now. Like I said, if you can do a good old like and a subscribe, that would be terrific. I'll catch you tomorrow.